Say What Sales, Buckley. Welcome to Whistle Talks.
Thank you so much. This is a pleasure. I've been talking with everybody from Whistle for a long time. So when I got this invite, it was a no-brainer. I had to be here.
And you're the first member that had, or a person that I've interviewed that has a very, very interesting middle name. And I feel like, how did you come up with that name? Do people call you that? Okay.
It's absolutely. So it's technically not my middle name. It's my personal brand, Say What Sales. I started it in 2015, 2016. I met a guy named Mr. I Hate Mondays. And he would do this content piece every Monday where he'd be like, you know what I hate about Mondays? And he would say something that was frustrating about Monday mornings, or say something about how people are cranky on Mondays and how people can fight it. You know, don't fall into the case of the Mondays, right? The Mondays. And he would say, you know, hashtag Mr. I Hate Mondays coming at you next week, right? And that was his like little catchphrase. He started with Mr. I Love Fridays, but nobody cared about Mr. I Love Fridays. Everybody loved Mr. I Hate Mondays. So I worked with him for about a year, and I really was impressed with his consistency and the way that he would like constantly do this every week. So fast forward like a year, I guess 2016-ish, I put out this post. It was like my first real like big boy post on LinkedIn, right? And it was a funny joke. It was, you know, hey, I wish people could be more honest in their sales templates. What about this one? Dear sir, madam, name, pick your name, right? We could do this dance for like 10 months and I could bother you every day for months at a time, or we can schedule 10 minutes and we can figure out if we should still be talking to each other. Doesn't that sound better? Right? And I just like threw this template out there. Well, I left the office and I went home and I came back in the next work day. I think it was a Friday that I did this. And that post had like 219,000 reactions. And my LinkedIn inbox was just bananas. I mean, with people from saying all types of things. Some people were like, I've gotten this template 4 times from 4 different salespeople today. Some people were like, I have gotten 3 meetings with this template today. And I'm like, I had to put in the comments, like this is crazy. Just so y'all know, that was a joke. Like, I was not trying to be serious, right? But I spent the next 6 months digging through all the engagement and setting up meetings and closing deals. And it went on and on. So I was like, man, there's really something to this. Create content and then reach out to people that connect with it and relate to it. So I was like, well, if I'm going to keep doing it, I have to give it a name. When I was a kid in the 80s, Say What was like super popular. Everybody was saying it. It was on Nickelodeon. And if you watch Nickelodeon, you know, Say What was like huge, right? Everybody was like, Say What. And then, of course, Say What Sales has that alliteration to it, rolls off the tongue really nicely. And I worked for Orkin Pest Control in the past, and that red diamond with the Orkin name in it was very recognizable. So the power of brand was already very like prevalent in my mind. So I thought, I have to give this thing a name. And that's what I gave it. And then later came the slogan, if you're a salesperson, we're the same person. And that just attracted all these salespeople to me. So that's the birth story of Say What Sales in about 3 minutes.
But that's obviously related to how you got into the industry of sales. Could you tell us a little bit about your business and what got you into the industry of sales?
Yeah, sure. So I came from the kitchen. I have a 15-year restaurant kitchen background. I worked almost every job that there is to work at a restaurant. So here we go. In and out of restaurants. If anyone's ever worked at a restaurant before, you know that it's 1,000 degrees in there. And sometimes you just want to do anything else. It doesn't really matter what it is. Anything else will be fine if I could do that. So I would take hiatuses from the kitchen and I would do sales jobs, mostly door to door. So I did, the first one was Kirby vacuum cleaners, door-to-door residential sales. And I did really well. I killed a lot of vacuums, as they say, right? And you would replace it with your nice, very expensive Kirby. And then, of course, I did AT&T door-to-door B2B, and this was selling additional phone lines. And this was probably the easiest sale as somebody that could read the room really well. So I would just hang out constantly in places, and I would wait for somebody to come in and need to use a credit card machine in these little mom and pop shops, and I'd watch them say, I have to let you go so I can run this credit card. And they'd hang up and they'd run the credit card. And I would say, hey, wouldn't it be great if you didn't have to hang up that call with that customer to run this credit card? And they'd say, absolutely. And I would say, I could add another line here for you for like $20 a month. And they were like, let's do it, because they were just tired of having to like balance the two. So it was very much like find the pain, be here often enough to see the pain, address the pain, sell the solution, right?
Right place, right time kind of thing.
And then Orkin Pest Control was residential. And that was even more fun because I was doing free pest inspections in your area. But I am a large mammal. And when you knock on somebody's door and you are a giant monster, it's often that they would rather you leave your card in the door jamb than come inside. So it was a lot of follow-up. And then I realized that I was doing it wrong. I was running around these neighborhoods knocking on doors. And really all I needed to do was park the truck in the right places and sit there. And people would come to me and say, can I ask you a question about roaches? Can I ask you a question about ants? Can I ask you a question? I have this beehive in my backyard. And that became my move. Instead of knocking on doors, I just moved the truck from place to place where the high traffic was, and people would just stop and ask the Orkin man the questions.
Today's topic of transactional conversation versus sales cycle conversation. Could you maybe tell us the difference between the two types of conversation?
Sure, absolutely. So one sales cycle is X amount of weeks, months, days. If you're looking at enterprise, sometimes years. If this is understood by both the seller and the buyer, then the expectation is that this will take some time. But sometimes you have an opportunity, especially if your average contract value, if your average sale has a low enough price tag on it, that you can be extremely transactional in these conversations. And it's an experienced seller will know how to tell the difference and be able to work several pipelines as a result. This makes them exponentially more valuable as a seller, because if I'm selling to an SMB vertical, small and medium businesses, right, these are mostly going to be transactional conversations. One or two decision makers. I'm basically looking to get pricing conversations out as soon as possible and get that agreement so that I can send that paperwork, get that signature, close that deal as soon as possible. Sometimes same day, sometimes a 2-day period, sometimes a week later. But when you're talking about mid-market and enterprise, this expectation is that you're going to be 30, 60, 90 days, a year, a 2-year sales cycle at the enterprise level, especially if that organization is one of those monster organizations like IBM or Microsoft or Salesforce, right? I'm using tech because that's my space, but you understand. That's the difference in the types of conversations. One of them has a very specific language. The other one has a very specific language. The best sellers know how to do both.
Obviously, being in sales, I'm sure you've heard of people being really, really desperate for business, and you don't want to come across as super, super desperate. So how do you distinguish the need between wanting business and needing business?
So I think this comes down to a few things that are very glaringly obvious to the buyers. It's less about the sellers because the sellers give themselves away. Very good friend John Barrows has taught me that there is a difference in wanting business and needing business. And we often will give the impression that we desperately need business by our language. So a good sign that your seller that's coming at you desperately needs your business is that they're proactively offering you a discount if you sign by X date. Buyers take crazy advantage of this. So sellers will often sell themselves short out of desperation because they're so eager to hit that number, or it might be the only number that they get in this quarter, this month, this week, whatever they're aiming for. So it's important we recognize that I really want your business and I'd like to earn it, but I don't need it because my pipeline is so big that I can default there and it's okay. Some people will call it sandbagging. What I say is that everybody buys things on their own time. You've never gone to the grocery store and bought the milk because somebody called you from the grocery store and was like, hey, Kayla, come on back. We got this milk. I know you need the milk. And you're like, oh my God, I have to run to the store immediately before they run out of milk. Thank God you called about the milk. That's not how people buy things.
Exactly. What are some tactics that you found that proves to work really well in conversation for it to be a more transactional type of conversation as opposed to just a sales conversation?
Yeah. So first of all, I get pricing out super early. I want to see what their reaction is, right? If they're immediately like, that's way out of budget for me, then I know that this is probably something that is going to be a crawl, walk, run conversation. maybe a little longer sales cycle, maybe a little more relationship building, definitely more value from me needs to come their way. Great example is you and I on this podcast right now. This is something that I do for companies that I'd like to do more things with. Why wouldn't I do this? This is how I build that bridge. So this is something that I think more sellers need to do. Get the pricing out early, start contributing immediately, thoughtfully to those organizations, build the bridge between you and the company, not you and the person that might be your signer, right? Because that's extremely selfish of you. And then of course, I love walkthroughs. I like a good pitch. I like how they relate to the val props and transition really nicely, but it needs to be very succinct. I talk a lot. I'm a seller. That's my job. But you'll notice that I'm very good at being articulate and bucketing my sentences and my answers into very small windows of time. And that's a gift that most sellers need. The next thing they have to do is realize that all of those things have to end with a question. Like, Kayla, doesn't it sound like we should be working together?
Yes.
Of
100%.
course it does. You saying yes to me on the show. I appreciate it.
Without a doubt. We have to be. It's like a match made in heaven.
I think so.
And recognizing transactional opportunities. How would a salesperson recognize, okay, this is a transactional opportunity?
I think that buyers often give certain signals in conversations that let sellers know when a conversation can be transactional. So I'll give you a great example. When I say to somebody, everybody starts off sponsoring one Sell Better show at $3,000, and we have to prove that your future buyer is in our audience. If I say that to somebody, then their next question is, okay, who's in your audience? Already, I know this person wants to move very quickly because they asked me a very relevant question to who they're going to get in front of. Now I can screen share. Oh, let me show you this graph really quick. Right? And I pull it up. I'm in sales mode right now, but I'm answering his questions. He's not answering mine. It's the other way around. This is now transactional. How can I help you as soon as possible is now my mind frame. His mind frame is this relevant to me right now? Is it going to solve the problem I need right now? So at some point, I'm going to take my screen down and I'm going to say, look, this seems really interesting to you. Why is this so interesting to you? Are you really struggling this much to get context and, people in the system that you should be talking to? Like, talk to me about what you're currently doing to solve this problem. And that's where I get into this. Okay, here's what I think we should do. And this is my hypothesis. And this is the transactional piece. I think you should do the one show at $3K, run your sales cycle, go to market, and let's really focus on sales ops created. That's the only metric I care about. If we do this and I see success with you and you see success with me, man, let's keep doing it. What else can we do? But if I can't prove ROI, I have no right to ask you for more information. But I've made our starting point so transactional, you're ready to swipe your credit card to get started. And what that is you paying for me to earn the credibility to come back to you with the bigger deal.
James, you really know how to seal the deal. Is there anything else that you would like to speak about in terms of transactional conversation versus sales cycle conversation?
Yeah, I want everybody to pick up on my tone through this entire conversation with you, Kayla. Because this was picking up on it. Very high energy conversation, right?
100%.
You've shaken your head, yes, the entire time we've been talking, subliminally, even if you don't realize that that's what you've been doing. And that's 100%. Because the whole time I've been talking, I've been subtly shaking my head, yes.
Whoa.
Conversation.
The psychology behind that is crazy.
The tone with which we sell matters just as much as the words that we use and the value that ties back to the problem. If we can tie in these three things, tone, words, and their problem, it's like the Holy Trinity. Very difficult to say no in those transactional conversations. Here's my tip for those of you that actually are looking to get better at identifying it. When you say things like, traditionally, people go about 60 days and that's our sales cycle, you've just put a time limit on when they're ready to buy. You've basically given the green light to them to wait 60 days before they cut you a check. Don't set yourself up for this. Ask them what their timeline is first. That's going to give you a great pace for when you should create that opportunity. Sellbetter.xyz is where you can find out more about the Sell Better Daily Sales Show. We host top talent, we host frontline talent coming in and dropping tactics every single day on SDR, AE stuff, negotiation, closing, personal branding, how you manage your data, your workflow. That's our entire life, is just putting great content out that's specifically for salespeople to get 1% better every day. Sellbetter.xyz.